Are you looking to take your cycling to the next level? Maybe you're working out too hard or not hard enough. Getting a coach can be key to helping you get there. And it's not just for the pros. Coming up next on Pedal the Springs, we will talk with a top local cycling coach and find out more. Coming to you from the Studio 809 Community Podcast at Next Us, a professional cooperative environment for small businesses in Colorado Springs. Welcome and roll on in to the Pedal the Springs podcast, where we banter about all things biking in Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak region. I'm your host, Tori Giffen, and what I don't know about cycling in this area, my friends do. And here is today's guest. We have Daniel Matheny in the house from Matheny Endurance. He coaches badasses. Yeah, right. That's your jam.
Yeah, I guess I have to tell the background of that story of how I got that tagline. So.
I do want to know. Let's just go into it. How do you? That's his whole tagline. I coach badasses.
So if you think of it, Matheny is my last name, and everybody pronounces it differently, and it's never correct. And that's my website. So an athlete that I've coached for a long time, and now a friend, become a friend through the process, went and bought the URL, icoachbadasses.com, and linked it as an alias to Matheny Endurance because he's like, who's going to remember Matheny Endurance or how to spell it? It's Matheny, whatever. So now if you just type in I Coach Badasses, it goes to my website, and it just stuck. Like, so, I mean, as an athlete, who doesn't want to be a badass, right? And so it's like, okay, it's a happy balance of, a little bit of cockiness, but you have to have that confidence as an athlete too. So it's like, it's kind of just worked.
That works. I like it. It's very memorable. Do you have stickers yet or anything, or we got to work on that?
I don't. Like we've talked before, it's like I never.
You need a marketing person.
I know. I'm all of it. I'm finances, marketing, coaching, everything. So I need to pass some of those duties off to everybody else. One-man show.
That's right. Well, we are here. I was dying to get Matheny into the studio. I did say that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was dying to get him in the studio because I met him really mainly through our collaboration on the Rampart Rager gravel grinder that we do out of the Buffalo Lodge Bicycle Resort. And then also I knew that you were doing the course direction for the Pikes Peak Apex by RockShock race, and you set up the whole course for that. But when we were talking about that race and the other race, I found out that, there's so much more to you than just the events that I know you from right now, that you have a huge history working for USA Cycling and coaching, and you coach all type of athletes, not just cyclists. But so kind of tell me a little bit about your background and what you do.
Yeah, it goes, like you said, it's very diverse, and I think that's what allows me to approach coaching with a varied perspective. A lot of people that come to me think I just work with elites or pros, and obviously...
And you do.
Yeah, I do, but it's a smaller percentage than what people think, because they think professional coach, professional services, performance services are only, held for that type of an elite, and it's actually a very small percentage. Frankly, it's more kind of like a niche of junior racers and kind of masters racers, because the juniors are up and coming and their parents support them, and masters, frankly, are, I'm a masters now, as you can see by the graying, the graying silverback gorilla look. It's one of those things where they've been established. They're maybe in a midlife crisis. They want to check off a bucket list, those kinds of things. So it's like, those are the people that have the money and the resources and are established enough to be able to kind of like pay for the professional service too. So it's like, I have to make sure to make a living with it, which is always hard, and a pastime that's fun too. So yeah, but
this is your full-time job.
Yeah. But that's also why, I think we met in some event promotion, or like me doing course directing. But I feel like I have a good perspective of that, because my perspective as a long-time racer comes from inside the tape or inside the lines. And then whenever I got asked to do some of these things outside, I was like, this is a good fit, because I'm typically the person that wants the experience from a racer's perspective. So taking that then into the production component, I can understand what somebody wants to have all the way through the process of, the registration, the event, what experience. And it's not always the same, because some people do events for different reasons. But I feel like it having these years and years and years of competition under my belt helps me to understand what the end user is trying to gain from it.
So what is your resume when it comes to your own personal race resume?
Oh man, I thought you were going to ask what was my resume to or what I do, because
No,
it's
I wanna
like jack
know.
of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Personally, and I would preface my personal accolades with, just because you have done it doesn't mean you're set to coach an athlete to do it, because there's some people that jump into coaching because they're a good athlete, and that doesn't make them a good coach. Like, you have to refine the coaching process. But
you went to school for that. You've worked for years, decades.
Kind of a constant learner.
Yeah.
Like, even in my spare time, I'm constantly voraciously trying to learn more, mentoring under peers, going to credentialing, certifications and stuff like that. It's not because I have to keep my credentials. It's because it's what I enjoy. Like, when I started to apply it in school, I was like, I couldn't help but apply it, because that's when I got my professional license naturally, because I was like, oh, I'm in exercise science classes or physiology. And it's like, it just stuck, because I was like, I'm applying this in what I'm doing right now, pursuing my pro license.
But where did it all start for you?
So to answer,
where were you born out of? When did you start biking or becoming an athlete? How did you get to that point in college where you wanted to go to school for exercise science?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the first question was, accolades or my resume results. Couple-time national champion, been on the podium, silver medalist 3 times after that.
For what?
Mountain bike. So marathon distance was my first kind of by chance win. I just went on a camping trip with my brother and his nephew, and frankly wasn't intending to win, and I got dropped from the lead group and chased back on and just did my thing and ended up winning by 20-something seconds over a 3.5-hour race. And it was one of those things of I just became a national champ, and then a duo national champion here in town, because Palmer Park was where they hosted 24-hour nationals. Yes. And a teammate and I went over there, and it was our home course, and basically we're doing night laps faster than the other pros were doing.
Was Tinker Juarez there that year? Or?
He was there the next year, and he actually dropped out because it was so hard. Palmer Park is not easy. If anybody knows the springs, Palmer Park is a sandstone, rugged terrain. It's not easy. And during the race, I blew my fork. I had to ride with it rigid. There was other people that dropped out when they saw the course, because it had several, it went on Templeton Trail, which if people know locally, that's a black diamond trail. And people saw it when they showed up, and they were like, I can't race this for 24 hours. And my teammate and I, Cameron, were just this is what we do. We had some photo shoots out there. We rode there after work, and it was let's throw down. And we lapped the second place pro field competitors, and just
home course.
Yeah, it was home course advantage, and it was our jam. We're both.
I love that ride, by the way.
Yeah.
I love that ride. That was Tim Scott, wasn't it?
Tim Scott.
It was sponsored by Ascent, and I lived right by Palmer Park, and my kids and I would go over to Palmer Park out there with our flashlights, hiking our way up through, so that we could go and cheer on the racers on the course and everything.
Yeah, you probably saw me out there looking like Skeletor in the late hours of the morning before, because it is challenging. I mean, you're going 24 hours, and it was one of those things no expectation. I'd done some 24-hour racing before, but it was one of those where it was added another Palmares to the thing. But it's those are the events, but it's one of those things where in the coaching and the performance side, it's not the end result that means it for me. It does mean something, but honestly, literally just last year, I had those jerseys framed, and honestly, they were still sitting, not even hanging on my wall. They're sitting on my desk behind my office, because to me, I had them just hanging in a closet, and it wasn't, people are like, you got to put those up. And I'm like, I don't want to bring attention to that, because it is something, but it was the process and the journey resulted in that. It wasn't the journey, or it wasn't the end result I was looking for. It's just icing on the cake. And that's one of the mindset things or processes I try to engage with athletes, because if they're always just putting their end result as the ultimate, and something goes wrong, if I'd have broke a chain or had a mechanical or something, then that everything you did was for no reason. You have to know why you're doing the day-to-day.
Right. I get that. So were you a bicyclist from a young age?
Yeah, but not like what you think. Like I wasn't like a racer. So I grew up in Kentucky, small town, Murray, Kentucky, and outside of that small town in a town called Kirksey or Almo or whatever. But, Murray's not that big. It has a college, but it's, in the maybe teens as far as population when the college is in. But I used to ride my BMX bike from 15, 20 miles out of town just to ride into town to play basketball at the college. And that was my jam. Like my brother
20 miles on a BMX bike. That's pretty badass.
And I didn't think about it, but it was just like the way to get in there. And it was like to play basketball for 3 or 4 hours in pickup games. And so when I realized like I didn't have my brother's genes, like he's 6'4" and 180 pounds, lean muscle, like he got all the good genes in the family. And I'm like,
for the basketball.
Yeah. And when I realized he kept growing and I never did, I was like, yeah, probably not going to be able to play hoops that much longer. I was good just because I had to play him every day, but the pickup games only lasted so long. And that was, the start of it. And whenever I started going camping with my brother-in-law and sister, and we did a few races, I don't always think that I'm the best at what I do, or I'm, excel at what I do because of like I am the best or I have the genetics. But I see people that do something and then tailor off of it. And what I've done is consistently work hard at something to see the results. And a lot of people think there's a magic pill that gets you there. And I'm like, nope, there's not a magic workout. There's not a magic session. You have to put in the work to get there. And once you do that, you change your physiology. And I'd say I'm at a different point than other people because of that. I've never given up on that like passion. And then it became my outlet. Like it's not just a job or a competition. It's like I commute every day. It's not somebody's twisting my arm. It's like yesterday it was snowing and I rode into work and it was 15 degrees and snow on the ground everywhere. But it was like, that's my time to decompress.
So you just choose it as a mode because it's the best way to get there. It connects you with just peace and relaxation, and it's not just a job.
It's a lifestyle. It's sometimes not even the best way to get there. It's like, but it's like, it's sometimes the worst way to get there. But it's like if you put it in as a natural part of your life, and it's not just, that's not for everybody. It's not that everybody needs to commute everywhere or whatever. And I'm not encouraging that, but it's like, that's for me. It's like if I have a rough day or whatever, it's kind of a reset button.
Can I ask you, do you Strava that?
It does, yeah.
Okay, because I do that. Like I would do that just so that my friends could see that I did that on Strava.
Yeah, I'm kind of a directional, like social person, like, and I consider Strava social, but it's like I'm better at like just letting it auto upload because like now with all the devices we have, it's like if you start recording something, or even some I've had that automatically like start recording when it senses the like haptic signals. Like I tested a Whoop for like 6 months and it automatically would register when you were doing something. It was amazingly accurate. Like, oh, you're mountain biking or you're road riding or whatever. And I'm like, how's it know I'm off the road?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it automatically starts uploading. And so then it's like, for me, I actually do it because I want to know like how many days I commuted of the year when I look back on things. Frankly, I've questioned actually getting off that stuff because it's just another thing to manage and do that stuff and just
kind of time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's what it is, like having kids and a wife and a business and everything.
I get that. So how the coaching? So you went to school. Start out with me from school. What did you go to school for, and where did that take you now?
Yeah, I didn't intentionally know that I was going to be coaching. Like a lot of the, the performance, exams you do that say this is what you'd be good at, had me pinned at like engineering or architecture and even like biology pre-med. And I probably should have went there because of those careers and the profit versus like the salaries. But the thing that directed me towards it was there was an open house for colleges. And in high school, I was lucky enough or gifted enough to be kind of like valedictorian. So I had good grades, but I kind of don't know how I got that. Like, it's not that I didn't apply myself, but I don't feel like I applied myself to the point of that. But I only applied to 2 schools, my home state university at Murray State and Lindsey Wilson College, which I applied to because I'd met a friend that as I was getting into riding, they had a varsity cycling program. And at the time, there was very few of those, probably maybe 5 to 6 in the nation. And varsity means that they pay scholarship, you're part of the varsity roster, And some small schools do this because they don't have, say, a football team or the big sports that people think of in the U.S. And so they want to bring people into the school in alternative modes. So sometimes it's like a championship bowling team or a soccer team or whatever it may be. So I applied to this school and went there and was a walk-on, and I was all about it because I'd started riding with local people, but didn't know anything. So I was like emailing the coach, like, what's my training plan? I got into school, like I got a good academic scholarship, so that to the coach, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was a good walk-on because like they didn't have to offer me much scholarship from the athletics. And they were like, he's almost a full ride with academics. Sweet, we got another person that scores points. And so they were like, I'll just ride. And I was like, what? As a coach now, I'm like, I get it, but it's also like so general. I'm like, what do you mean just ride? Isn't there more like specifics? So I went to that varsity program, and between starting there and transferring out after 2.5 years, I went from basically like a beginner level, sport level racer to almost pro. When I left after 2.5 years, I was on the semi-pro ranks and moved my way up to scholarship. At starting, I wasn't getting anything, but at that point, I was like what they call an A racer, because it goes like E, D, C, B, A. So I worked my way up to the kind of top ranks, and I was racing endurance and gravity because all my roommates were gravity riders. So we were doing like dirt jumps and slalom and kind of some mountain cross downhill stuff. So
what were like some of the key takeaways that you remember from those days that have just stuck with you?
I don't know. I mean, we had a lot of pros on our team then. And so because we were a varsity program, I think I was just a constant sponge. Like I would like try to go on rides with them and emulate what they were doing and try to figure that out. And then once I transferred schools back to my home state, and it was just because like randomly, like it's a small private Christian university in Kentucky, I transferred because like the biology professor was on maternity leave and they didn't replace her. And it's like, the courses I was supposed to be progressing with, where they were like, oh, we're going to put those on hold. And I was like, well,
how do I graduate?
Yeah, I was like, what am I supposed to do? That's the problem of like a small university. So I was like, well, I'm going to transfer back. And I've always had a hard work ethic. So I was like, I have connections to work at home. I'm putting myself through college, like working in the summers to pay my tuition that I wasn't being covered. And so I moved back home, had a smaller tuition because it wasn't a private school, it was a public university. And basically because I transferred from private to public, I was behind on credits because not all of them transfer. So I was like 2.5 semesters in. And so then I was like, how can I finish in 4 years? So I was like 21 hours a semester trying to get my pro license. And I was working. I worked in like a factory. I worked in the gym, opening the gym every morning. And it was like, that's probably the one thing I remember. Like I'll see pictures from my sister when we were like roommates together. We shared an apartment in college. And it was me sleeping on the couch, like my face in an anatomy and physiology book or something. And maybe it soaked in because hopefully it stuck. But it was like, I was studying and working and writing, and it's like nothing was easy because it's like, I was training 15 to 20 something hours a week at the peak, and it was demanding because it was also school and work and everything else. So
I think that is the life of an athlete, though. I mean, everybody kind of has to have that day job or your full-time responsibility, and is trying to figure out how to manage life and find that time to be able to train and compete, right?
Yeah. And I say that to a lot of athletes. I'm like, none of us get paid to do that. Like even me saying I acquired my professional license, a lot of people think like, you were paid? And I'm like, oh no, my phrase is like, we all pay dearly for this. There's very few professionals, especially mountain bikers, that get paid. And it's like, the few Olympians that we've had and stuff like that make a salary, but it's like, unless you're in the pro tour or something like that, or now there's like, the gravel, individual people that create their own path, it's very hard to make a career out of it. So it's like, frankly, a lot of people are working and managing those guardrails of like, what's my training time? What's my life? What's my work? And all those things. And so, and I think that's actually a healthy balance, because the people I've worked with that have too much bandwidth, then they're left to their own demise of like, I can do anything I want, but then they waste it. Whereas like, if you have a finite window, it's like, you've got to know what your purpose is and get that job done, and you can't be sloppy with it. So I think it's actually somewhat of a blessing.
That's great. So you left college.
Yep.
And then when did you go to USA Cycling, or what was your next things, and where did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I actually went back and worked at the college, the private school I was at. I lived with the cycling coach there and was an admissions counselor. It was just kind of in between for a short period of time, and actually got people to come to the college that I was at. It was a good experience. I then moved and did some health consulting, what I consider preventative health care. So I worked with like dietitians and nurses and other exercise specialists like myself to give preventative health care plans. And I think that gave me a different perspective than some coaches, because you see people that want to perform, and then you see people that want to just have a healthy lifestyle. And there's a big differentiation between that. And there's a lot of media and marketing and stuff like that go into it that people don't realize that it's a huge industry of sports nutrition or all these different things. And so if you can get a tagline on somebody and they believe it, then they're going to buy your product or whatever. And so seeing it from the basal level of that health consulting, then going on to moving to Colorado and, working at a performance center, getting a job eventually at USA Cycling as the collegiate high school director. And then
how long did you do that?
A little over 3 years. Yeah. That's what brought me to the Springs, actually.
So collegiate high school director, what did all that entail for USA Cycling?
So I moved to Colorado when I met my current wife. She lived in Denver and was going to school. And I was basically doing nothing when I moved to Denver. I felt, kind of twiddling my thumbs. Like, she came home from work one day and I was like cleaning the slats between her blinds, because like I was just I didn't want to be a do nothing. And she's like, why aren't you enjoying the Colorado mountains or whatever? And she's like, this time will pass, so you better take advantage of it, as I was like looking for a job. And so I found a job
Sounds like a good wife, though.
Yeah, she's great. I found a job here in the Springs, and she was going to night class a couple nights a week for her professional degree in behavior specialist and seeing kids with autism. And I was like, I'm driving 5 days a week down here to USA Cycling at the Olympic Training Center when they were housed on the complex. And how I got that was when I left the varsity program at Lindsey Wilson and then moved back to my home state, Murray State, they didn't have a cycling team. And it was like, well, why not? So me and a buddy with a few people that rode bikes in Kentucky, we started a team. And like literally just this last October, we had our 21st year reunion of the team, and it brought like 15 or 20 of us back together. And why do it in Kentucky? We did it in Colorado because a bunch of mountain bikers, why would you want to meet in Kentucky? And we've all relocated since then. Imagine that.
That's amazing.
But so I started a club program, which is totally different than varsity. So that's why I had the good skill set for working as collegiate high school development director there, because I saw the varsity aspect, I saw the club aspect, started one to compete, and we even made it to national championships a few years, and one of our slalom riders made a jersey the last year I was there, and it was like, oh, cool. So we've seen it from both perspectives, and that's what kind of brought me here. But then as I got more and more into the collegiate and high school stuff, I definitely loved it, but I was working less and less with athletes, and I wanted to be working with athletes. And so I ended up resigning and going in coaching full-time with CTS here in town, and worked for them for a matter of 5+ years.
Okay.
Up to like,
Is that where you met Jason, our friend from the Rampart Ranger that we put on?
Yeah,
okay.
When we had the Endurance Sports Club where we had like a big multi-rider system. He was like the club manager that ran a bunch of the classes, and then we had a coaching, what we called pods, like open air, like little coaching areas where all the coaches, and so that's where we worked together.
I remember that because I used to organize these Chick-fil-A free breakfast rides.
Yeah.
That like got a whole bunch of people off the couch and riding their bike, and then next thing you know, a whole group of them were like training at CTS, and Jason and probably you were like coaching them, and they're not like major athletes; they're just people wanting to get better at cycling and stuff. Yeah. So is that really what you do now?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things we talked about before was like some people, train train too hard, and some people don't train hard enough. And that's at the same time. Because the thing is, like, the perspective of working with elite athletes all the way down to beginners, and having that perspective of, health consulting, even admin stuff of working with new athletes that come into it, because a lot of that comes in collegiate, because people find that sport because maybe they played a varsity sport, but they didn't take it from high school to college. And so then they're like, but I can still ride my bike. It's like commuting. It's like once you stop playing basketball, unless you find a pickup game, you're not going to keep doing your sport. So there's club sports. And so that's why cycling is that way. And so, even chatting with some parents of cohorts where my kids go to an enrichment program, it's like my perspective sometimes changes of what their experience is, because I have a theory of relativity in the performance world of, like, I've trained myself to a very high threshold of pain tolerance or endurance, whatever it may be, but other people may not. And I've had a conversation with a mother that was like, whenever I realized I had to start working out to have a little bit of weight management, and I never had to do that in my life, I thought I was going to die. Like, as I was trying to run or whatever. And I was like, do you realize that you don't have to do that? She's like, well, I got to run to get the benefit. And I'm like, actually, you don't. Like, it's all relative to you. Like, there's times where you probably even shouldn't be running. It's too stressful on your, it's a sympathetic nervous system. Like, it's just too much on you. So if you're handling kids and doing all this other stuff. And when she saw that I was like, maybe you should be going easier, she was like, really? And some people don't realize that. They think they have to have, like, the no pain, no gain. But if you know the reasons behind what you're doing, then you can say, well, I'm okay. I don't have to prove anything to anybody. I don't have to run just because somebody say I have to run. But she was thinking, I've got to keep running because that's the only way I'm going to get the benefit.
Did she become a client?
No.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out a way to, like, help that client.
Yeah. How do you do that? I mean, like me.
Yeah.
Like me, I'm a chubby little beer drinking bike rider who just can't seem to take the weight off. But I just rode 300 miles across the Florida Keys and with the Primal team, by the way, was amazing. And I did figure out, though, that, like, I thought that I was not that good, but if I could head out just right before the team did and pick up their draft when they passed by, I could hold on.
Oh yeah, drafts are amazing.
I was like averaging 19, 20 miles an hour.
So that's on the concept of, like, strength in numbers. Like, the thing is, some people always think, like, you ride so fast, and frankly, I ride fast when I have to.
Yeah.
Like, maybe people think I ride fast all the time. It's like, I know when to strategically go hard, and that's, like, I would say, to help people, that is actually finding your rhythm. Because in the rhythm, I mean by, like, the peaks and valleys of, like, you make the hard days hard, you make the easy days easy. And whenever I said that, like, you're training too hard and too easy at the same time, everybody wants to make every day, like, hard. And it's not necessarily hard as you need to move your dial, but it's like they want to get the endorphins going. They want to get to that point where they feel like they're working and they feel like they're doing something. And that works for a certain amount of time, but it's the gray zone that will get you to a plateau. And so there's a difference between, like, training for fitness and training for performance. And sometimes I think when somebody actually puts a performance goal in front of themselves, like, I'm going to go do Ragbri, or I'm going to go do Leadville 100, or I'm going to go do Steamboat Gravel, or I'm going to prepare for Rampart Rager, then they have a performance, then they can say, okay, I'm going to build up these goals to get me to that point.
So what does that look like? Because I do these things. Like, I do Ragbri, the 7-day ride across Iowa. I just, I had very little training going into the Florida Keys and that 300 miles. I just was counting on altitude and flatlands.
You're banking on the high octane fuel.
I was banking on that because I did not have time in the saddle as much once the weather got cold here in Colorado. But I do Ragbri every year. So help me put this together for people maybe like me. What would make me take that leap? Like, I've got to train for Ragbri next year, and it's 7 days, about 500 miles across Iowa. What would that look like, a training program that would take place from January until July for me to train for RAGBRAI, and how much would that cost me? Or like,
Yeah.
what are the tiers? How could your program help me have a better RAGBRAI than the last 4 years?
I think how to have a better event, RAGBRAI, whatever it may be, is that it's individualized versus static, because there's lots of great static plans out there and static by meaning I'm going to go find something online that I buy that is like, 24 weeks to your first marathon or whatever it may be. There's great with those. The problem is, and I've tried to do this a few times, and I don't have hardly any static plans because there's a big marketplace where people sell them. And great, it'd be income if I sold a few of those at, $30 a pop. But it always kicks back on me of what happens whenever you get sick or you go on vacation or whatever it may be. So the difference of coaching to me is having somebody that is objective to then individualize it and also validate certain things, because I frankly think athletes...
you get frustrations and you hit plateaus and you think you're doing everything right.
Frankly,
following the plan.
athletes or people are their own worst enemies, because they're like, well, this is on the plan, I'm going to stick to it. And I'm like, I'm the first to raise my hand and be like, nope, divert from the plan. Having a plan is only as good enough as having flexibility in the plan, because it's holiday season, whatever it may be right now. It's like, do you need to be training full steam? Maybe if you've got an event in the next few months, but sometimes it's knowing that you have the flexibility to work within your own schedule. And sometimes, I would say, for you, it's consistency, because I heard, it come out that you were like, oh, I wasn't as consistent as I wanted to be, and I was banking on this and that whenever I got there. That's okay, but it's like the number one kind of lever that I see anchored to people that perform high, athletes I've worked with for over a decade, is consistency. Even if they're doing it wrong, they're doing it consistent. And it's not, a magic pill of, this workout or that workout. It's consistently what I call going to the well and pulling buckets. They are constantly doing the work. And then it gets to the point where we've got to pull back. Like me saying, okay, your body needs a rest. Your psyche needs a rest. Your mindset needs a rest. And it's hard to pull back those athletes. I had a conversation this morning of somebody that's between medical procedures, and he's like, I'm going to go ride an hour today, and then I'm going to try to push 2 hours tomorrow. I'm like, are you cleared? He's a physician. And I'm like, are you cleared to do that? And he's like, well, they kind of didn't say. I'm like, so what's it gaining you? And he's like, I know. I'm like, we're stubborn. I'm the same way. When I had foot surgery, I was on the bike the next week. It's whatever it may be. And it's you have to check yourself. And that's what a coach can do is a good coach can actually address that with you and say, this isn't the best thing for you, because sometimes it's not always just the exact what's the best for your physiology. It's your psyche, it's your mind, it's your mindset, because what I say is where your mind is engaged, your body will follow. Because a lot of athletes want me to say, put a plan in place, follow it rigidly, and that's the last thing I want. So I don't take every athlete that comes to me. I have an interview process, it's mutual. And frankly, I try to have a performance network of say, maybe you'll be better with this coach, or maybe you need to go see a different person first before you even have a coach. It's not always just come to me, I'm gonna work with everybody.
So what does your client roster look like right now? Who you got?
What do you mean? Just the variety of different people?
The variety of different people and what they're training for.
All over the place. I'd say a lot of the people I work with are kind of the long endurance events, so Leadville, Steamboat, Breck Epic, Colorado Trail, a lot of those kind of things.
Pros?
No, pros. Mostly. I would say there's very few on that top end. Like I said before, kind of when I thought you were asking a certain question, I was jack of all trades, master of none. It's I do. I'm a board member of a junior team startup here in town. I do event promotion. I help with the Rampart Rager. I do the Pikes Peak Apex. Talent ID coach for Rocky Mountain USA Cycling. Do my own coaching. It's I've got my hand in all these different things to kind of fund it, as well as actually that's my interest. I want to be able to give back to that. So I would say the majority of my athletes are, masters athletes and some junior athletes from that aspect.
And how do you have a contract term with them leading up to a certain race, or is it an ongoing thing?
Yeah. So typically I ask for a minimum of I usually say a minimum of 6 months. Sometimes it's 3, depending on if I know their history or if they've been referred to me by somebody, because I don't do a ton of marketing. I kind of get word of mouth, or if one of my clients has a good experience, they pass them on. And I've been lucky with that, where it's actually kept my roster relatively full. Like I see people putting things out of all these like Black Friday deals, half off or percentage off coaching or whatever.
You don't have room for that.
And I'm like, you know what, people, I said, my roster is getting pretty close to full. And if you want to be in, you want to be in. I'm not going to, basically run all these marketing schemes to get people in. It's like, to me, it's like, if you want my service, come to me. It's no frills. I'm not your cheerleader. I want you to do the work, but also like I'll stand behind you in the process. And
So your athletes are all over.
Yeah.
Are there any that you are like hands-on here with?
I had a performance center here in town at one point, like that I did through the Pikes Peak bike tours, because obviously people aren't riding up and down the peak during the winter months. So I ran a studio there for a couple of years. But now, because so many people do indoor Zwift or their own riding, kind of just
I remember that.
Yeah.
That was Dylan's shop, right?
Yeah, it was Dylan's.
I remember that.
It was great. I think his eyes lit up. He's like, somebody's going to rent my space in the winter whenever we can't do anything.
That was cool.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, but it was right when everybody was transitioning into like the Zwift racing and stuff like that. And so I think there is something like, I did even like say spin classes when I lived in Kentucky, and then even out here to kind of fill in gaps between. I think there is something that's missing between like, having people in person. And that's why people, you guys run a lot of group rides from Buffalo Lodge. There's something that is different about riding with others. And I think that's something that's kind of been given with the Zwift, even though it's like avatars and riding online. But there is a unique aspect that's not captured when you're with a coach or with other riders or things like that. Because, even Chris Carmichael, one of my mentors and that I worked under, he always said, where there's a wheel, there's a way. And that means like, if a wheel's getting in front of you, you close that gap. And that's racing. Because like, do you want to be dropped? And you even said it when you were in Ragby, whenever the people, or in Florida, whenever people came by you and you jumped in their draft, it's like you're stronger as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of been my model of like why I've worked with collaborated with other people here in town, like event directing, promotion, that kind of stuff. Is my thought is everybody's stronger as a group. Sure, you can go out on a breakaway by yourself here every once in a while, but you're going to be lured back in because that peloton's going to chase you down. It's like what happens in the final stages of the tour. It's just a measured capture. But they're like partnering with everybody else, you can accomplish more as a group. So don't try to put your face into the wind all the time.
Do you talk much about rates? Just like, can you look up your website, icoachbadasses.com or mathenyendurance.com, Matheny.
That's right. Yeah.
Endurance.com.
Yeah.
Mathenyendurance.com or icoachbadasses.com. Can you go on there and see like the different tiers or levels of coaching and the cost for that and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's levels. Frankly, I was just, that's part of my business planning right now, is actually considering going away with that, because the one thing is the different tiers or different levels of coaching, kind of everybody gets a dynamic plan, which means it's tailored to them, their goals. It's, delivered every 3 to 5 weeks. Frankly, I probably make some of my athletes irritated because like when it gets to the last week of their phase, I'm looking at those last workouts or those last sessions before I'm updating it. And they're like, hey, what's coming next week? And I know that they need that, but also I'm waiting for the last few things to roll in to see if we accomplish the goal, because I'm not just like dropping it in there to be like, oh, this is what I've always done. I'm looking at what they're doing to say, this is working, let's keep pushing on it. This isn't working, let's redirect. Because a lot of people think of like training as like, in the sports science world, it's, oh, here's a mesocycle, a macrocycle, here's all these different things. And it's like, they see it as like these blocks, like a week is this cycle, a month is this cycle. Your body doesn't know what a 7-day cycle is. As I age now in my 40s, the recovery process is different than my 30s, is different than my 20s. And so having that perspective, like if I've got 2 young kids, it's like if I, whenever they were in the toddler years, if we didn't have a good night's sleep, it's like that affects you. So it's like, oh, if I got to work on the schedule, do I need to still do it? So those kinds of things. So, the different levels of the coaching, frankly, I kind of want to do away with, because I don't want somebody to hinder or pull back their amount of subjective feedback, because that is actually the most beneficial part. I can look at power files, heart rate files, GPS files, workout files, race files all day long. But the things that I look need to triangulate the effort level is the subjective feedback. And that's what's gotten too easy now with like, smartwatches or GPS devices that as soon as you walk in, Wi-Fi connects, it uploads, I get it. But nobody puts in, this is how I felt. This is the conditions. Like, oh, why did you not feel good today? It's like if I went out and rode today and a coach didn't know I was riding out in slop and mess, and it was like, it's warm temperatures out even though there's snow on the ground. It's like, oh, this affects how your output is or how I slept last night.
So are you having phone conversations with them, or is it, okay.
Yeah, so phone conversations, usually it's kind of twisting people's arm to almost get some of those at some points. It's like they think it's overutilizing the service or they're too busy to do it. So it's like that's part of it. But, I use an interface.
But I experienced that even just on my ride across Florida was that, like I was doing killer on these one days and everything, but there was no wind.
Yeah.
You threw wind in that and it was a whole different story.
Yeah.
So you have a phone conversation with them and you find out what kind of conditions they're working out or riding in. You're finding out the factors that are going on social, like I'm feeling under the weather or I couldn't do this today because I had a kid that was doing that. Like it's a human interface.
Exactly. So, and that's the thing. It's like knowing what's going on behind the scenes a little bit puts, it paints the whole picture versus it just being a workout. And that's what is different from, buying a plan and sticking to it. If you know some of the interactions, and what I try to do with athletes is I'm not a doctor. I don't get paid to be on call. So frankly, if somebody's not bugging me a ton, like I'd rather them put it out there, but I'm not paid enough to be like somebody's personal assistant all the time. That's like, hey coach, I'm on my bike right now. And ironically, that just happened earlier today, like where they were on their trainer trying to do a workout and I just happened to be texting them and it worked out. And that's not always the case, but I'm like, that's not what I'm doing. Like I want to give them the principles and the values. So whenever they're faced with a session or a decision, it's called if then. If this happens, then I do. And we try to create a certain number of scenarios. Like if I'm tired, then I'm going to dial it down, a notch on the intensity scale. I take it from a workout to just an endurance ride. Or, I'm going to, if it's a, low intensity day, maybe I'd take the day completely off. I push it out. I don't try to pick up, missed sessions. Like, I miss this. And that's the number one thing that I see people is like they see something as a missed session and they're like, oh, now I got to double up. I got to do that one and the one that's next on the calendar. I'm like, nope. Either you're going to do the one we missed or just pick up the next session, whatever it may be. And so having that feedback from somebody to the objective, because they're always going to be their worst enemy and be like, I got to do that and that, overachieve. It's easy for me to say, nope, confidently just back off, do this, and we'll get back on track.
So what is like the base level that you could get in on? Like what would it cause? I mean, is money a factor for most of your clients at all? I mean, is that like one of their first questions? Is it not a question?
It is. I mean, typically the, coaching can range from, depending on inclusions, I guess, but it's usually starting around a couple $100 a month all the way up to, packages of, $1,000 a month. Very few at that high level, but it includes one-on-one, like meeting them at destinations, doing camps, maybe their event is something very specific and we're doing skills sessions. We're doing, I'm doing support for them at the race. Like this year I was at Leadville supporting athletes in the pit. Like I was there the day before, sorting through their aid bags, getting things organized. I took my own equipment there and somewhat, cannibalized it. Like I had wheel sets and I had derailleurs and stuff. So if somebody came through.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was like, if I'm doing this, I need enough people to commit to this and I'm going to be here all day because, to do that, you got to be up at 6. And I was with them at the start. Like I was taking their jerseys, their extra clothing, because it was 30 degrees at the start. I was taking their extra bottle saying, finish this, throw it off, getting them to the start line. And then as soon as they were done, boogieing out to the aid station, setting up and sitting there for 12 hours, like basically waiting for people to come through after a couple hours. Here's your stuff. What do you need? Making a real time, tap on the fuel gauge. Like, how are you? What do you need? Let's get going. Don't stay too long. Go. And doing that repeatedly. And, that's one of those things of like, that's a high level engagement, but that's what some people need.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you have that kind of a service. So how did your athletes do compared to what their goals were?
Some did better. even better, like shocked me. Like I work with a local guy here and blew my mind, like had a goal and just blew it out of the water based on his stats, what he'd done, everything like that. And I was just like, amazing. And some people that had, what I would say better stats, and they didn't underperform, they just performed, but the finish rate, like, are you committing to get to the line? Some people actually didn't even make it there because it's such a big undertaking, because of like just their life. Like they were like, I want to do this. This is such a big thing. But like that event is such a monopoly of like lifetime, Leadville, everything that goes into it. It's like, it can be consuming. So from that standpoint, it's like me managing, what the expectations are, because that's the worst thing that can happen is like when your expectations are way up here, but your ability or your preparation, like there's a quote from like I think it's a military person, but it's like, you don't rise to the level of your competition, you fall to the level of your preparation. So I always tell people, like right now, I'm texting people, I'm calling people, I'm like, get your work in, because the events, the results happen now. It doesn't happen in July or August or whatever. You do the work now, and then it'll be, your runway's that much longer.
So let's say, go back to, I'm training for Ag-Bri this year. That $200 sounds like a base plan for a month. What does that get you?
Gets you the dynamic training plan, like basically like sit down, we have an intake, you address goals. Even me saying like, well, Ag-Bri's an event, but what do you have to set you up for success there? Maybe there's some other events you need to do. I suggest things along that process. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But it's like, it's up to me to say, maybe you should do some other test events between now and then. It gets you the communication, basically besides just like the phone calls and text messages and stuff like that.
And how often is that? Once a week?
Typically around every 2 to 3 weeks,
okay.
2 to 4 weeks on the kind of base plan. And that's why I'm thinking about going away from it, because I don't want people to think, I can only contact them once a month or whatever it may be. Because sometimes I would say like the first few months are the most intensive. I don't want people to restrict their communication and that kind of stuff, because it's me getting to know the athlete and the athlete getting to know me. And, frankly, it's a blunt process. Like I'd rather somebody be more open and disclose what they need rather than, draw things back and be like, I only need to adhere to this. And if we need to address it, but typically it's, the schedule adjustments, because it's like, maybe we talk bi-weekly, but also like it's the amount of times I'm going to go in and actually physically adjust things. And so it's like, if somebody's like, I work a 9 to 5, I don't have many different, what I call variables to throw in the mix, then they can fit into a base plan or maybe a base plus plan or something like that, that it gets them what they need. But if it's somebody that's, constantly traveling, constantly doesn't know their schedule, they're racing a ton, that kind of stuff, then the level of attention that we need to do goes up, because those base plans, I think it's more of like a Grand Fondo or a marathon. It's like, I have one event, we can set it and work towards that big goal. Whereas like a lot of people that race a lot on and off, then they need to have constant manipulation of what I call like how hard to push, and not have like blocks of the year. It's those blocks get fuzzy, like, oh, let's push for 5 weeks instead of 4 weeks, or let's push for 2 weeks really hard and then recover. So it's basically riding these waves of like how your body is willing to, what I call readiness to adapt. And nobody really knows what that is until you actually start pushing it, and it changes. And that's hard, because like where you may be right now may not be where your readiness is in 2 months, because as you get more fit, it changes. Because then your body is more willing to accept training as you get more fit. So
I want to be more awesome on Ag-Bri this year. Be my 55th birthday.
Yeah.
Ready to rock it. So I wanted to ask you, so how do you stay fresh, and who are you listening to? What are you reading? Is there a podcast you follow? What can you share for where you go to for your knowledge and information?
Yeah. I'm constantly, I'm a member of the NSCA here in town, so I'm constantly reading their journals. That's kind of more
what is
for
that?
National Strength and Conditioning Association. So I'm a CSCS, or a Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist.
Okay.
That is more on the strength side of things. I'm a level 1 USA cycling coach, a PMBI, Professional Mountain Bike Association, International Association, skills coach. So I kind of tie in those things, but constantly, like, it's what I do in my pastime too. It's like, even I just started reading a fiction book and I was like, oh, this is awesome, because all my other reading is like physiology journals or research. If you look at my reading tab on my notebook, it's like literally like just all these journal articles of like, current research. So it's that, but it's like, some of the podcasts that I've been guest on, like say Fast Talk Labs or Evoke Bike, those kinds of things, like even the CTS Train Wrap podcast, like Adam Pulford was one of the coaches I worked with and mentored under. He's got a great Train Wrap podcast. All of those, even some of the AI or machine learning, like Trainer Road podcast stuff, they have, good resources across the board. So I try to like sample all of those different things while I'm...
You also said SUP, the stand-up pedal action?
Supa, yeah.
Supa, sorry.
They're on a like hiatus right now. Like they had a couple seasons, but that was more of an...
You can go back.
Yeah, I was a guest on there, and it's like I listened to some people's podcasts there. It was local, but it was interesting because it was more of an entertainment than it was a, continuing my education, because it was like, oh, I'm actually getting to hear these stories of people that I ride with every week or that I know here locally, that race in the region. But now I know their background. It's like I learned things about my neighbor I didn't know that, won the Colorado Trail Race, but then I hear about him as how he went through the process and his background, because you don't go that deep sometimes when you're just in passing, but, and I made the hand motion across.
Is there anything else you subscribe to?
I try not to subscribe to anything. Like I go and seek it out if I want it. So it's like subscriptions actually kind of bother me. So it's like, instead of subscribing, I go and seek them out when I need them, I guess. So, yeah.
So what's next for you?
Whew, man. This year, I'll probably get in trouble with my wife because we've been talking about this, but the Colorado Trail Race, or the Colorado Trail, it's basically a self-supported, all of the Colorado Trail from Durango to Denver or Denver to Durango. And it's like, just under 500 miles of mountain biking. From what I've heard, they claim it's a beautiful beautiful week to take your bike for a hike. But that's one of the things it's been on my list to do. The Marathon Worlds, so where I won my national championship is marathon distance, which is kind of like the 40 to 60 mile mountain bike distance. It's actually in the U.S. this year, and at Snowshoe, West Virginia. And so I was thinking about heading there just to, experience what world championships would be like. You're going to enter? Yeah. I went to Marathon Nationals last year, 3 weeks after Apex, which if anybody knows what I do for Apex, it's like I ride the course again. So what the pros and amateurs do, I kind of do it 3 times almost within the course of that 2-week window, or even the day of, because it's like I set the course and I pull it down. Because you need to know
what it's like day of.
Yeah, and I'm setting it and pulling it down and making sure that our volunteers, clear the course. And then even the week after, I'm back out there again, like clearing it to make sure that nothing's left, because you can only account for so much of like what volunteers help with.
Are you available for more of that type of work if somebody has a race that they're putting on?
I don't know if I want to put myself out there for that. I'm trying to blend the mix of like helping out with a Rager and creating a Southern Colorado gravel series and stuff like that.
Well, let's talk about the Rager. Yeah. So we do the Rager, and we're looking at, this is all tentative right now, September 14th, 15th. This is a gravel race that's been going on for, what are we at, like 8 or 9 years now?
I think so. It had a little hiatus or something like that.
A little COVID hiatus, but we're looking at...
That date may be a little premature, because I think there's some other events that are in the...
So we're trying to figure that out, nail that down, but it's been going on for a while, but I'm trying to enhance that. You got the Apex. You're back on the Apex this year. It's in June.
It is. We moved it from September to June, so that's a big change.
Why was that?
So... Personally, I've giving feedback from like knowing what's happening within the racers. Like by September, everybody's tired. The first year it worked because we were like one of the only events that occurred during like the COVID year. And so this is our 4th year going into now. And so
there's so many races now.
And everybody's jumping on the gravel bandwagon. And so even a lot of those ultra racers can make more money with their sponsors and things like that to go to these big gravel events. And even last year, after we announced our September date, Gravel National Championships launched their date on the same weekend as ours, and it had an $85,000 prize purse. So our pros that came to this event, who's going to question like, oh yeah, the guy that won our race won Gravel Nationals. Who would have thought it? So we changed because there's a lot of what I call like saturation in the fall with the high school racing, like we have over 1,000 kids in Colorado that are racing bikes all through August and ending in October. So the parents of these kids couldn't go to the event because like their kids were in races in Glenwood Springs or Leadville or whatever high school league race was. So moving it earlier allows people to compete in that, as well as it's more of a normal season entry for other events, because the way I encourage athletes is do this race so it can help you progress to this race. And so, if somebody's doing Breck Epic in August, then June is a natural progression of a 3-day race to go into a 6-day race in August. Or, hey, let's use this as an altitude experience to then get you to Steamboat Gravel or Leadville 100. So it fits in the sequence a little bit better. And us being a front range town, we can get away with earlier season than later. And so might as well try to move it earlier. The problem is Colorado Springs is saturated with the summer season of outdoor recreation and stuff, so it was hard to get a permit anywhere between like Memorial Day and Labor Day, and that's a challenge here because there's just so much going on in general. Yeah
So we've got those. What else have we missed today?
Oh man, there's probably tons of things.
I mean, we could talk forever.
We'll have to have an installment number 2.
I think you should come out with your book of like coaching isms, life is like a box of chocolates, I
have all these like analogies.
What are some of your favorites?
Like
what
we
are
were
your
talking
go-tos?
beforehand, like I said, it's like the haze in the barn. You got to know when to light the fire and burn it down. And it's like that almost comes from like Joe, the guy that helped me with I Coach Badasses. But it's like I have all these little things that hopefully stick in people's minds, because it's not always like what is actually happening or the performance. It's sometimes what you're telling yourself in your head. And so sometimes those things actually help you get to the end result or hold back when you need to, because it's not always about going harder. It's like, even cross training. And it's funny you say that, because it's like I've had an idea for a book and I've got like this index of all this stuff and a podcast of my own. And frankly, I just need to ship it to go in this, the phase of like Seth Godin or whatever. But it's like, I need to get it out there, because it's like, I don't want my services to only be held for elitism or whatever. I want to see if I can take the 20 plus years of experience and just get it out there to everybody. So hopefully that's something I can just get out there soon, but it's just figuring out a platform and the right delivery for people to help. So
give me one more.
Oh man, I don't know. It's got to be.
It's got to be organic.
Yeah, it's got to be in the context of something. So,
yeah. You don't have another favorite go-to?
Like consistency's king. Like that one's all over the place. But there's all kinds of them. Like I say, if-then scenarios. Like if this happens, then I've already said that. But yeah, it's all dependent on the conversation. You just don't pull them out whenever you don't need them, I guess. So,
I know, on the spot. That's a wrap. I think you're amazing, and I like the old beard now and everything.
Thanks for calling me old. Is that...
No, the older beard.
That just gives me the experience, right? Because it's like at one point I had like the young pro mentality, and then it's like I had a kid, and I was like, how can I keep racing at the level or competing at the level that I see other athletes I coach at? And then it was like, I had 2 kids, and then it changes. It's like man-to-man defense in the house and running a business. So I feel like that experience, along with the training and the continuing education, actually gives me good perception of actually like what people are going through.
And you're still kicking butt on the trails. I hear this all the time. You're still killing it out there. So
try to. It's walk the walk and talk the talk. Because if I don't walk the walk, then maybe people don't believe in me. Not to say that that's an epitome of a good coach, but it's like I've learned to take when it was all my job and I could ride however much I wanted, to then it's like, oh man, how do I uphold that? And it's like, it's been a unique process to, figure that out of like, what can I manipulate? What variables can I change to still be competitive at the level and come close to like, nipping at national championships? Even in September, like I said, like getting a silver medal was like bittersweet, because I was like, oh, I missed another jersey by 1 spot, but it was like, I got second. That's awesome, considering I had no plans all year to do it. And 3 weeks after the biggest event that I helped produce, with all that fatigue carrying, I went there and actually like delivered. And like I suffered like a dog, but it was like, all right. I
think second is just awesome. I mean, it depends on who your competition is. I am currently at the Buffalo Lodge Bicycle Resort, second or silver to the Broadmoor as best hotel in the Springs in the Gazette.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
I mean, second to the Broadmoor.
Yeah,
Is that crazy?
That's good.
I mean, it just depends on who you're competing against, how good that
just
second
don't go
feels.
ask like Ricky Bobby, because it's like second, that's a first loser.
No.
If you ain't first, you're last.
It just depends on who the competition is. Oh.
No, that's awesome.
Well, thank you, Daniel, so much. And thank you guys for listening to Pedal the Springs podcast on Studio 809. Be sure to check out the show notes for links we mentioned in this episode, and also hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, be sure to check out all the other fine podcasts on Studio 809, your local voices of the Pikes Peak region. Pedal the Springs podcast is produced by Studio 809 and presented by the Buffalo Lodge Bicycle Resort, the only bicycle-themed lodging in the Pikes Peak region for cyclists. Check us out at bicycleresort.com for more information.